On May 28, 1940, the atmosphere inside the Reich Air Ministry was filled with pride and overconfidence. On Hermann Göring's desk lay an intelligence report from America. It said, President Franklin Roosevelt had asked Congress to approve the building of 50,000 airplanes a year, an idea so bold it sounded impossible. Göring, head of the German Air Force, took one look at the report and laughed. He was sure the United States didn't understand real war production. In his mind, turning car factories into airplane plants was a fantasy. Air power, he believed, couldn't be built like cars on an assembly line. What Göring didn't realize was that the plan he mocked would soon become his nightmare. Those same American factories he dismissed would go on to outbuild, outfly, and outlast the Luftwaffe, proving that the power of production could win wars just as surely as the power of the gun. What Göring willfully failed to grasp was that in Detroit, the transformation was already underway. A Danish immigrant, William Knudsen, the former General Motors president, had abandoned his $300,000 salary to serve his adopted nation for $1 per year. As Roosevelt's production chief, Knudsen was already orchestrating what would become the most ambitious industrial transformation in human history. Within 4 years, American factories would achieve not just the impossible 50,000 aircraft Göring had mocked, but nearly 100,000 planes annually. Crucially, this industrial titan would simultaneously supply 2 theaters of war across opposite oceans. The declaration that had triggered such German scorn came on May 16, 1940, even as German panzers were slicing through France. Standing before Congress, Roosevelt stated, "I should like to see this nation geared up to the ability to turn out at least 50,000 planes a year." The reaction was widespread skepticism, even among allied nations. America had produced only 3,611 military aircraft in 1939, and the Army Air Corps possessed just 1,700 combat planes, many of which were obsolete. Roosevelt was demanding a 14-fold increase in production capacity. When presidential advisor Bernard Baruch was asked who could achieve such a miraculous level of production, he famously replied, "First Bill Knudsen, second Bill Knudsen, third Bill Knudsen." Knudsen became the pivotal architect, bringing principles of automotive mass production to the complex task of manufacturing aircraft. The shift began immediately. By December 1941, American factories were already churning out 2,000 military aircraft every month, representing a 20-fold increase from just 2 years prior. This monumental awakening earned the designation the Arsenal of Democracy. Boeing expanded its Seattle facilities, Douglas Aircraft hired thousands of workers, and the Ford Motor Company announced plans for a colossal bomber plant at Willow Run, Michigan. The Nazi leadership's deep dismissal of American capabilities was rooted in both willful blindness and pervasive racial prejudice. General Friedrich von Boedicher, who served as the Wehrmacht military attaché in Washington from 1933 to 1941, consistently sent back accurate intelligence reports detailing the rapidly accelerating American industrial mobilization. In a cable sent in December 1940, he specifically warned that American war production will reach unimaginable heights. Berlin, however, dismissed these prescient warnings as merely defeatist exaggeration. When Boedicher had met with Hitler in February 1939 to discuss the American potential, the Führer responded by ranting about American racial degeneracy, choosing to ignore intelligence assessments completely. Hitler proclaimed that Americans were half Judaized, half negrified, and thus incapable of sustained serious warfare. This profound ideological blindness would ultimately prove fatal to the Nazi regime. The prejudice extended through every rank of the hierarchy. Luftwaffe intelligence reports even dismissed the subsequent entry of women into aircraft factories as nothing more than a sign of American desperation. They could not conceive that democratic mobilization might vastly exceed the output achieved by totalitarian command. Furthermore, when reports detailed American factories running 3 shifts daily, German analysts simply assumed the figures were exaggerated. The Nazi worldview simply lacked the capacity to accommodate the industrial reality emerging across the Atlantic. Ford's Willow Run plant was the physical embodiment of this immense American ambition. Constructed on former farmland beginning April 18, 1941, it became the largest factory in the world under a single roof, spanning 3.5 million square feet with an assembly line that stretched for 1 mile. Charles Sorensen, Ford's production chief, promised the impossible, to build one B-24 Liberator bomber per hour. This was a breathtaking goal, given that other factories were only managing to build one B-24 per day. The initial results of the colossal effort were catastrophic. The very first bomber, completed in September 1942, required a complete rebuild. Quality control failures skyrocketed, reaching 50% by February 1943. Against the promise of hundreds of bombers monthly, Willow Run was producing just 56. Critics dubbed the troubled facility, "Will It Run?" But Ford engineers persevered relentlessly. They tackled the complexity of the B-24's 488,193 individual parts by breaking them down into manageable sub-assemblies. They pioneered the use of moving assembly lines, developed hydraulic riveting tools, and introduced prefabricated wiring harnesses. Throughout 1943 alone, they accommodated 578 design changes while fiercely maintaining the necessary production pace. By September 1943, monthly output had reached 148 bombers. By December, it was 365. The decisive breakthrough came in April 1944 when Willow Run delivered 428 B-24s, equating to one aircraft every 63 minutes, 24 hours a day. This single factory was, astonishingly, now outproducing the entire German aviation industry. German pilots were the first to encounter and recognize the disturbing truth of American production superiority on the front lines. During the Tunisia campaign, Major Johannes Steinhoff, commanding JG-77, noted grimly in December 1942, "The American pilots are no longer amateurs. Most disturbing, there are more of them every day." The revelation accelerated drastically throughout 1943. On January 27, 1943, the first American raid struck Germany itself, with 64 bombers attacking Wilhelmshaven. By October, during the devastating event known as Black Thursday at Schweinfurt, the Americans could afford to lose 60 B-17s and replace them within just 2 weeks. The numerical mathematics of the conflict had become inescapable. During Big Week, spanning February 20th to 25th, 1944, the 8th and 15th Air Forces mounted 3,500 bomber sorties, specifically targeting German aircraft production. The Luftwaffe suffered devastating losses, including between 262 and 355 fighters, but far more critically, approximately 100 irreplaceable veteran pilots were lost. General Adolf Galland reported directly to Göring that Germany was losing 1,200 fighters monthly, while only managing to produce 1,000. In stark contrast, America was producing 2,500 fighters monthly, while losing only 400. Major Heinz Baer, one of Germany's top aces with 220 confirmed victories, described a mission over Brunswick in January 1944. The bomber stream stretched from horizon to horizon, comprising at least 700 flying fortresses and liberators. By 1944, American aircraft production had reached truly staggering proportions. In that single year alone, factories manufactured 96,270 aircraft, which included 16,048 four-engine bombers, 35,743 fighters, and 22,591 multi-engine aircraft. This immense production in a single year actually exceeded Germany's entire wartime output of approximately 94,677 aircraft. The industrial disparity extended far beyond raw numbers. Each American bomber carried 13 50 caliber machine guns with thousands of rounds of ammunition, while German fighters were increasingly launching with only partial ammunition loads. American bombers were equipped with advanced bomb sights, powered turrets, and sophisticated navigation systems. Frequently, German fighters lacked functioning radios. The production speed was relentless. Boeing's Seattle Plant 2 was producing 16 B-17s daily by May 1944. Douglas Aircraft, which had employed just 68 people in 1936, had ballooned to 167,000 workers operating across 9 facilities. North American Aviation churned out 500 P-51 Mustangs every month. Lockheed achieved the astonishing feat of producing one P-38 Lightning every 90 minutes, simultaneously implementing 2,127 combat-driven modifications. Supporting industries kept pace with this velocity. General Motors produced 57,658 aircraft engines under license, and Packard built 55,523 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. Alcoa's aluminum output swelled by 600%, while Dow Chemical's magnesium production grew exponentially from 6 million pounds annually to 333 million. Ford even redesigned tools for smaller hands, which inadvertently improved overall efficiency. Better positioned workstations decreased injuries, and lighter pneumatic tools reduced worker fatigue. Yet, German intelligence continued to misinterpret female employment as a sign of desperation. A captured Luftwaffe report dismissed these workers as temporary, wrongly predicting a resulting collapse in quality. Instead, precision improved. Women excelled particularly at detailed work, including wiring, instrumentation, and inspection. Their integration into the labor force was a clear representation of democratic strength, not the weakness that the Nazis imagined. As American production soared, Germany retreated into a fantasy of technological salvation. Göring authorized the Jaeger program in February 1944, which dispersed fighter production into 729 largely underground facilities utilizing slave labor. The Middle Complex facility subjected 60,000 prisoners to horrific conditions, resulting in the deaths of 20,000. These decentralized underground factories generated more defects than they produced operational aircraft. Slave laborers actively sabotaged components, and the transportation between scattered facilities caused extensive delays. Quality control utterly collapsed. The entire Middlework complex produced fewer engines monthly than Ford's single Chicago plant. Meanwhile, American innovation accelerated rapidly. Boeing developed modular B-29 construction across 4 separate facilities, featuring completely interchangeable parts. The B-29, which cost $65,000 each, was pressurized and incorporated technology that Germany could not even match in prototypes. By early 1945, America was producing 100 B-29s every month. The full culmination of this industrial power was dramatically demonstrated on June 6, 1944. The D-Day invasion employed 11,590 Allied aircraft against only 319 German sorties, a staggering 36-to-1 superiority. This was no mere tactical advantage, it was industrial annihilation. Leading up to the invasion, between January and May 1944, preparatory bombing missions dropped 145,000 tons of bombs on German targets. This tonnage exceeded all German bombing of Britain throughout the entire war. Transport aircraft delivered 3 full airborne divisions in a single day, utilizing more planes than Germany's entire transport fleet ever possessed. By December 1944, single raids involved 1,200 bombers, escorted by 900 fighters. The P-51 Mustangs had the necessary range to reach Poland, the performance to match any opposing fighter, and existed in quantities that made losses virtually irrelevant. German pilots nicknamed them Indians, observing them swarming everywhere simultaneously. As defeat loomed, even elements of the Nazi leadership were forced to acknowledge the production catastrophe. In December 1944, Goebbels wrote in his diary, "Göring's promises about Luftwaffe superiority now seem criminal delusions. We fight the world's greatest industrial power with rhetoric." Field Marshal Rommel, before D-Day, told his staff, recognizing the coming tide, "The Americans can lose 10 tanks for everyone we destroy and still overwhelm us. When they land, they will come with such material superiority that no position can hold." Even Hitler himself finally admitted the truth to Albert Speer in January 1945. We should have listened to Bodeker's reports. He confessed that the Americans' industrial potential had been decisive. While we built hundreds, they built tens of thousands. Speer later testified that American bombing had successfully reduced German production by 35% for tanks, 31% for aircraft, and 42% for trucks. He stated unequivocally that the American attacks, which followed a definite methodical system of assault on industrial targets, directly caused the breakdown of German armaments. Germany's Messerschmitt 262 fighters operating mid-1944 represented genuine technological innovation, flying 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter. Hitler and Göring clung to the belief that this wonder weapon could restore air superiority despite the insurmountable numerical inferiority. However, Germany only produced 1,430 Me-262s in total, with never more than 200 operational simultaneously. Critical materials were scarce, necessitating inferior substitutions, and the engines required overhaul after only 10 hours of flight. Hermann Göring's arrest on May 8, 1945, by elements of the U.S. 36th Infantry Division marked the beginning of his confrontation with industrial reality. Initially, he was defiant at the interrogation facility in Augsburg, maintaining that German technology had been superior, overcome only by sheer numbers. His transfer to Camp Ashcan in Luxembourg, the dedicated facility for high-ranking Nazi prisoners, brought intensive interrogation. In July 1945, Major Kenneth Heckler conducted extensive interviews, documenting Göring's slow, evolving recognition of the vastness of American industrial superiority. "I knew American industrial potential was great," Göring admitted to Heckler, "but the execution exceeded my worst fears." He noted that Willow Run, that single factory, produced more aircraft than the entire German bomber force had at its peak, calling it incomprehensible. He expressed particular astonishment at American logistics. "Your ability to supply forces across 2 oceans while maintaining domestic production. This was beyond our conception." He realized Germany could not adequately supply forces 500 miles from its borders, yet the Americans supplied armies 5,000 miles from America. During the Nuremberg trial, prosecutors presented Göring with overwhelming evidence of this industrial dominance. Charts demonstrated America producing more aircraft monthly by 1944 than Germany managed annually. Films of Willow Run's assembly lines were shown while prosecutors listed the German cities destroyed by bombers originating from that single factory. Göring's testimony on March 14, 1946, revealed his struggle to grasp the scale. "I believed the economic and technical potential of the United States to be unusually great, particularly the Air Force, but I never imagined they could increase aircraft production 100-fold in 4 years. Such growth, he claimed, seemed physically impossible." Prison psychologist G.M. Gilbert documented Göring's subsequent obsession with the production statistics. He repeatedly calculated ratios comparing single American factories to the entire German output. He remained fixated on Willow Run, calling it "that damned factory that broke our backs." When he was shown the figures revealing America had produced 812,615 aircraft engines compared to Germany's 241,675, Göring simply stared at the numbers in silence. The mathematical reality of defeat was undeniable. The scope of this transformation remains staggering even today. From 3,611 military aircraft in 1940, America produced 295,959 by the war's end, including 97,810 bombers, 99,465 fighters, and 98,684 other types. This represented not just quantity, but systemic superiority across every aspect of manufacturing. The financial dimensions defied conventional economic logic. Aircraft production consumed $45 billion in 1940s dollars, equivalent to $800 billion today. The B-29 program alone cost more than the Manhattan Project. Yet, rather than causing bankruptcy, war production generated unprecedented prosperity. Unemployment, which had crippled the nation during the Depression decade, vanished completely. Personal income doubled between 1940 and 1945. War bond sales, purchased by the workers themselves, financed much of the expansion. Willow Run workers alone purchased $45 million in bonds, essentially funding the operations of their own factory. Germany, conversely, dedicated 40% of its entire industrial capacity to aircraft production by 1944, yet still produced less than half of the American output. The increasing reliance on slave labor proved catastrophically counterproductive. Sabotage was endemic, quality collapsed, and, unlike in the U.S., where productivity increased 300%, productivity per German worker actually declined after 1943. Beyond raw production lay organizational brilliance. The War Production Board seamlessly coordinated 184,000 companies. IBM punch card machines tracked millions of components across thousands of suppliers. MIT's radiation laboratory, employing 4,000 scientists, developed navigation systems that granted American bombers all-weather capability. When combat revealed the B-17's vulnerability to frontal attacks, Boeing added chin turrets within 60 days. When Pacific operations demanded extended range, Consolidated modified B-24s without halting production. German modifications often required months or even years, but American improvements took only weeks. On October 15, 1946, hours before his scheduled execution, Hermann Göring composed his final letter. Within it lay his most complete admission regarding the significance of the production war. "The Americans won through industrial power, not military prowess," he wrote. "We were not defeated by better soldiers, but by better factories." He lamented that the nation the Nazis had dismissed as capable only of building consumer goods had buried the Wehrmacht under aluminum and steel. His final recorded statement to Gilbert was equally revealing. "We declared war on an industrial giant while it slept. When it awoke, we were doomed." He realized they had not just been outproduced, they had revolutionized production itself, and every aspect of their system proved superior. The Reich's marshal, who had mocked American capabilities, died knowing that a single American factory exceeded his entire Air Force's lifetime production. Military historians consider the American production achievement the decisive factor in Allied victory. Without the overwhelming material superiority it provided, D-Day would have been rendered impossible, the bombing campaign unsustainable, and the Pacific War unwinnable. Richard Overy, a leading historian of the Air War, concluded that the outcome was determined not by tactical brilliance or fighting spirit, but by the weight of material. The Allies won because they buried their enemies under an avalanche of production. By 1944, America alone was producing more military aircraft than the rest of the world combined, both Axis and Allied. This was not incremental superiority, but order of magnitude dominance. Germany faced not mere defeat, but obliteration. Hermann Göring's initial dismissal of American production capacity stands as one of history's most catastrophic miscalculations. His contempt for democratic industrial potential ultimately cost Germany the war and millions of lives. His failure to recognize the capabilities of the United States sealed the Third Reich's fate before the first bomber even reached German skies. The transformation from 3,000 to 100,000 aircraft annually demonstrated that free societies, when facing an existential threat, are capable of achieving the impossible. American workers didn't just meet Roosevelt's impossible goal, they doubled it. They didn't just match German production, they exceeded it fivefold while simultaneously fighting in the Pacific. The Reich's marshal, who confused tyranny for strength and mistook ideology for capability, died knowing that American factories had produced more planes in 1944 alone than Germany had managed throughout the entire war. His mockery of democratic industrial capacity became history's most expensive joke, paid for in the currency of total defeat. The victory was not merely in the numbers: 295,959 military aircraft produced by America versus 94,677 by Germany, but in the method. It proved that free workers could vastly outproduce slaves, that democratic cooperation exceeded totalitarian command, and that a nation of diverse citizens and immigrants could unite to achieve the unimaginable. Hermann Göring laughed at the idea of America producing 50,000 planes annually. America responded by producing twice that quantity, fundamentally transforming global history in the process. His laughter echoed through history as the sound of catastrophic miscalculation, the fatal dismissal of democracy's arsenal by a man who understood neither production nor freedom. In the end, both buried him and everything he represented beneath 300,000 aircraft, turning his initial contempt into history's most complete defeat. Was the true lesson of this colossal industrial clash simply that size matters? Or did the failure of the Reich suggest a deeper truth, That tyranny, by limiting knowledge and crushing individual initiative in favor of ideological blindness, inherently imposes an industrial ceiling far below the boundless capacity of a society founded on individual liberty and free collaboration. The factories built to fight World War II ultimately revealed that the most powerful weapon forged by a democracy is not its technology or its army, but the collective, innovative will of its free people.